From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. Jake Haulsic took a chance on himself when he left a paycheck and steady job to start his own company. The risk has paid off. The Business Observer writes often about risk takers like Jake. To read more, subscribe. Go to businessobserverfl.com to sign up. Hello and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Jake Haulsic, founder and CEO of Trofeo, a Tampa software development firm. Jake, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna get into what Trofeo is and talk about the company and how you started it. Before we get into that, let's get our audience to know you a little bit more. And so the obvious way to go here, Jake, would be to ask you techie questions because you're a tech guy. But we're gonna go, analog here. We're gonna go a little bit non-tech to start. So what is the best meal that you can cook or prepare?
Oh, I like it. I like these questions. So it's funny. I love to cook. I actually have my grandma's recipe book, and she was Italian. So my favorite meal is to cook her sauce with spaghetti and meatballs.
Spaghetti and meatballs. Simple, practical, but good. I like it.
That's it.
Yes. Excellent. Second question. If you, and you were in our 40 Under 40 issue as well, most recently Business Observer 40 Under 40, and you might have heard this question pop up because we ask a lot of these random fire questions. But here we go. If you were on a deserted island, would you rather be alone or with one person?
I would rather be with one person. I think it'd be tough to be on an island alone.
Alone would be hard for sure. Last question. Do you have a hidden talent and what is it?
I would say cooking actually is my hidden talent. I don't do it often. I don't do it for a lot of people, but I like to do it. And now that we're around the holidays, I did it for Thanksgiving. I'll do it for Christmas.
Awesome. You just tell me what time to come over and I'll be there.
Absolutely. I'll send you the invite.
Excellent. All right, Jake, let's move on to Trofeo here. Tell us about Trofeo. What is that company and what's its niche in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Trofeo is a Microsoft partner, and we specialize in helping companies implement their cloud solution, which is Microsoft Azure, their security solutions, and their data and AI solutions.
How and why did you start the company?
Yeah, I've always wanted to own my own business. In fact, that's how I got to Tampa. I'm originally from just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I moved down, one, because of the weather. I was tired of the cold. But two, the University of Tampa at the time was one of the few schools who had an entrepreneurship program. So I moved down to major in entrepreneurship there. I wrote 3 or 4 business plans while I was attending University of Tampa. And then once I graduated, continued to come up with, business ideas. I launched a few along the way that were more, I'll call them side hustles, but learned a lot from them. Yeah. And it was just the right time. I had learned a lot in my career, both at multiple tech companies and had exits, and there was really, over the course of that time, there was 2 things that stood out as to why I wanted to launch Trofeo. One was culture. I really wanted to build a firm with a good culture where people wanted to come work. That was entrepreneurial, where people had a say, where they were part of building it and wanted to be part of something special. So I think that was my number one trigger was to rebuild that culture that I had at one of my previous firms, Tribridge. The second reason was really to go back to relationship. I'm big on relationship. I'm big on doing things for the right reasons. And so I wanted to incorporate that into the business and make sure that that was at the heart of what we were doing. We aren't selling technology. We aren't selling solutions. We're helping people solve business problems and grow their businesses. And we do that by really getting to know the owners of the business, the culture of the business, and helping them succeed. So those 2 items were really important for me and and really the main reasons I launched Trofeo.
Jake, you mentioned Tribridge, and I know you have a mentor who was at Tribridge who had played a big role in you starting this company now. Tell us who that mentor is and kind of what role he has played in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Tony DiBenedetto's been a huge mentor of mine. It's funny, we talked about the business plans I wrote in college. That's actually how I got to meet Tony. I heard him speak in an event, and he talked about how he got Tribridge started and, got funding for it and all that. And I said, I got to go talk to him about my business plans. And I went to meet with him a couple of weeks later for coffee with the intention that, hey, maybe I'll get some funding for one of my business ideas. And he offered me a sales job. And so that's how I got to meet Tony. And, that day I was getting a mentorship that I didn't know I was getting. And it turned out to be the best investment I could have got that day, better than an investment in my business plans at the time. And really over the course of our relationship, which we've known each other, probably about 15 years now, he's had a huge impact, not only on my business career, but also personal life, just, seeing, how he treats his wife and his kids and raises his family. It's all been a big impact on me when you're starting a company or just even busy in a day-to-day work life. It's tough to balance that out. And I think having a mentor and being able to see him be successful at both his business life and personal life was just huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, Tony's had very humble beginnings. Obviously, some people know his story. I should have Tony as a guest on From the Corner Office as well, because he has a great story. How did you sort of see him, and what did you learn from watching him interact with others?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned from him, really twofold. One is have trust in people. That was a big thing. He always trusted people to get their jobs done. You hire people for the right reasons. It's the only way you're going to scale a company. Yeah. And I've seen the other side of a company where people can't let go and they can't trust, and they bring someone on, but they just can't let them go and do their job, right? They have to be over top of them. And so I think that was one huge thing, I learned from him is just have trust in people and hire the right people. And I think the other thing is really get to know people for the right reasons. That's been big for me my entire career. Your coworkers, you don't just talk to them when you want them to do something or expect them to do something. Get to know them outside of work, get to know their families, take a real interest in them. I love to do that. That's something I saw, him do. And so I've carried that through my entire career and here into Trofeo as well.
Tony, I think, is like that with pretty much everybody. The first time I met him was actually a day where my young teenage son was off from school. And I remember I met him at the Panera on Kennedy in West Shore. And I think my son was 12 and came in with a book. I don't remember the book, but I remember Tony wanted to engage with my son about the book he was reading. Not that he didn't want to talk to me with the Business Observer. He was just really just into like whatever Aaron book. It was a play I think he was reading at the time. And I think Tony has that genuine approach to people.
Without a doubt. And, it's carried on to me. In fact, I was having lunch with Tony the other day and I was telling him this. One of my favorite things to do is help people, connect them to other people, whatever. Even if it doesn't involve me, I just love helping people. And I got that from him without a doubt. I see him do it all the time. And I've just picked the ball up there and I absolutely love to do it.
All right. So you mentioned, Jake, you mentioned culture, and that's a word that, it's a buzzy word, gets thrown out a lot, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I agree with that. But sometimes it's hard to define culture. How do you define a good company culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. You made all the great points there because I think a lot of people talk about culture, but I don't think a lot of people know what it is. And it's difficult to build. For us, one of our staples was to have an entrepreneurial culture. Yeah. Where every team member is making decisions, and we give them the bandwidth to do that. And so for us, that's our number one staple. And we hire that way too. I tell people all the time, look, if you're coming here for me to tell you how to do A, B, C, and D, like this is not the right place for you to work. If you're coming here and you want to come up with better ideas on how we're doing something or come up with a new process or solve a problem we have, that's what we're looking for. And I think installing that level of trust in people and giving that bandwidth to go, create ideas, they feel like they're a part of the growth because they are. They're building processes from within. And I think that's part of being a good leader is letting people build processes within the organization because that's the only way you're going to grow.
Yeah, 100%. I think the Observer Media Group, well, I know the Observer Media Group where I've been here 20 years now. One of the things I love about our entrepreneurial culture is that we don't have a manual for everything. Some things you just have to figure out. And the employees that tend to not be successful here, in fact, one specifically said at an exit interview, there was no manual. And we're like, we know there was no manual, right? We want more problem solving, more, if you could dream it, you could do it. Because I think your space, software, you need that. Media, digital media, you definitely need to be innovative and creative. So it sounds like you want that creativity on your team.
That's exactly it. That's, I always tell people, hey, don't just bring me a problem. Bring me a problem and bring me 3 solutions and we'll discuss which one is the best way to fix it. But if you're just bringing a problem, we aren't fixing anything. And so that's just that's the mentality we want here. And I think the other thing, Mark, I'm big on is, and I think this got lost during COVID, is getting people together. I think the magic that happens from collaboration and team building and just having people together is important. So at least once a year, we fly everybody in, get them together for a couple of days, to discuss strategy and where the company's heading. But more importantly, just, let them go out, have dinners, have drinks, and truly get to know each other. And that's what builds a team.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So Jake, talk about leadership. What's one characteristic that you think every leader has to have? What's that one thing that's top of the list for a leader to have?
Yeah, for me, it's trust within the employees. If you don't have that, you'll never be able to scale and you'll never be able to lead. You'll be hovering over, the employees. And if you take a good employee and you hover over them, they're going to leave, right? And so I think trust in your employees to do the right things, allow them to make mistakes, allow them to learn from them. It's the only way you're going to grow as a company and as an organization.
Yeah, that's so true. And we've talked about your mentors. What's the best leadership advice, whether it was from one of your mentors or just in general? Maybe it could be a book you read, but what's the best leadership advice, Jake, that you've received in your career?
Yeah, that's great. I've taken a little bit from each company I've worked at, and I think there's things that companies you see and you're like, man, I'll never do that as a leader. Yes. And there's things in companies you see that you will do. So it's been a little bit of everything. But I would say the biggest thing is patience. I am kind of a fire from the hip, always want results, always want to get to the next level, which is great. You want that as a leader, but you also have to balance that with patience because I think you can, in some situations, get over aggressive and lose sight of not only the short-term vision, but also the long-term vision. So I think having patience is a big key.
Yeah. Something else in leadership that we hear a lot is storytelling. You talked about clients and you wanted to be more, forward facing. I wonder if that plays a role in this, but how important has storytelling been to sort of Trofeo's growth in the marketplace and in leadership in general?
Yeah, it's definitely played a role. I will say from my perspective, I'm short and to the point, so I don't do a lot of storytelling. So internally, I don't think it's played as much of a role. But I think as far as setting our vision to the external market, setting a vision for the company, it's played a really big role because we can learn and lead from example and past mistakes in real life situations that we've all been in. So from that perspective, it's played a big role.
And moving to another topic of leadership that comes up a lot is resiliency. That, another word like culture used a lot. Sometimes things are not going to go your way. You mentioned COVID, and that didn't just go your way. That was everybody's not going their way. But in general, how do you come back from, setbacks or, failures, something you want to mulligan on? What are some things that you do as a leader to overcome those?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think that's probably why entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Is bouncing back from those is tough. And I don't even think it's bouncing back. You get to a point where you just can't let it affect you. Because if you get down and you're trying to lead from a down position, you're going to fail. And so I think the way I get past resiliency and bounce back is really every failure or every miscue has to be a learning opportunity. Where did we go wrong? And I'm a big proponent of saying, let's go ahead and fire, because that's the only way we're going to learn and course correct. And I've seen too many companies that just sit back because I think they're afraid of making that mistake and they're afraid of getting down. They sit back and they say, man, we have to have it just right before we take it to market. And, 3 years later, and they haven't released anything because they're still making internal tweaks. But guess what? They never asked the market for feedback. And so, I think part of it is making those mistakes and learning from them. And I think if you're told no enough as a salesperson, or you make enough of those mistakes, you just learn that they're going to happen, and you don't get down, you move on.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess in your field as well, software, you got to be pretty fast on these things. Otherwise somebody's going to take the idea and run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct.
Going back to a sort of bigger leadership question, big picture, how do you want people to describe your legacy as a leader?
Yeah, great question. I want it to be remembered as a place where people wanted to work, that had a culture that people wanted to join, almost like they were part of a family. That's really what I want people to remember. In years down the road, I want them to say, hey, either want to go work at Trofeo, or, man, I wish I did work at Trofeo. But that's really what I want this company to be remembered for, is the culture and the family-like community that we're building here.
And on a segue to that, the last question, Jake, what's big and exciting, and what are you looking forward to in 2026 for Trofeo? And what are one or two things top of mind for the company this year?
Yeah, I think, two things top of mind, and they go hand in hand. One is just our top line growth. We've had tremendous traction, so we're heading into the year with a lot of momentum. And so we're excited to see that continue to take off. And then supplementing that with the right resources. We have a lot of hires lined up that are strategic for us. And so we're super excited to get those people on board, continue to grow, continue to create careers right here in Tampa and around the country.
Excellent. Well, Jake Haulsic with Trofeo in Tampa, thank you so much for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.